Hi, I'm Lamisile Pamela Ngubane, and this is the Entity Dynamics podcast. Entity Dynamics is a culture development consultancy where we believe that culture creates behavior and behavior creates reality. So, the title of this video is Where is the Love? So, I was listening to a tarot reading this morning, and the reader was talking about how humans are basically eating each other. I mean, eating themselves and each other, actually. And then I sent in the comments, like, thanks for the reading. I think it would be so much easier for us to stop the self cannibalization if we could take accountability for ourselves. But for some reason, we find it easier to shift blame onto others. And I said easier in quotation marks, right? Because it's actually not easier. In the long run, it's going to cost us everything. Because, if you have free will, you have to take accountability for how you use it. You can't just like willy-nilly throw your free will around, causing havoc, and then not taking accountability for it. Okay, because with free will comes the responsibility, you know, to use it in a way that when it's time to take accountability, you will be prepared to take accountability and you'll be happy to take accountability. So obviously there are people who are like very happy to take accountability for what they do because they know that what they're doing is good, it's well intentioned, and they can judge it by its fruit. It bears good fruit. People are helped. They have good vibes with their neighbors and their family members. They have peace within themselves. They can sleep at night. They can look at themselves in the mirror and and such things. So they're using their free will in a way that they will not be afraid to take accountability for their actions. And also the consequences of them using their free will are for their highest good and for the highest good, or for the good, I suppose, maybe not the highest good, but for the good of themselves and other people. But I was just thinking to myself, why is it so difficult to take accountability for ourselves? Why is it easier to switch, to shift blame to someone else? And I think it's because of a lack of love in this world, right? And it reminds me of that Buddhist saying, and I think I quoted it before. I have quoted it before in a previous video, which says that tears will fall where they know they will be received with sympathy and compassion, basically with love, right? So, you know, it seems that because there is not enough love in this world, people find it difficult to be honest, because they're afraid that if they are honest, they'll be punished for it or ridiculed for it. And I think this is why so many people walk around trying to play a role that they think other people need them to play in order for those people to feel comfortable enough, or I don't know, satisfied enough with that person to validate them as a human being, to give them love, to give them affirmations that make them feel like a human who is worthy of that affirmation and that love. And so it just tells you that, how did we get to this point where people essentially view themselves as objects that must perform certain things in a certain way in order to win the approval, the stamp of approval, like the little gold star of approval from other people, in order to feel worthy of being alive, I think, essentially. Because I think when people are feeling ashamed of themselves, they actually feel like they're somehow not worthy of life. And so, I mean, I just wonder, like, because for me, I see everything as interlinked. And I just think to myself, is it also not linked to then how, for example, land is like, it's owned by someone all the time, even the state, and you can't just go to a piece of land and decide you're going to chill here, grow some veggies. Maybe if there's a river, you'll do some fishing or take water to do stuff. Like you have to get a permit. You have to ask someone's permission. There's other pieces of land where it's just like open land, but there's a sign saying no trespassing. And obviously here in South Africa, we hear a lot of stories about farmers shooting people who've like trespassed onto their land. Homeless people are treated like absolute garbage, like literal garbage, because they don't have a home, because they're destitute and poor. I mean, why are they in that situation? No one wants to find out. And I think that's a prime example, of this self cannibalization, because here is human capital, so to speak. And I hate to even use that term. Here's a valuable human being who is intrinsically valuable because they're a human being, and all life is intrinsically valuable, whether it's human or plant or animal or mineral or whatever, ethereal, all life is valuable and should be treated with utmost respect. But here we are as a world, a culture. And there's some societies in the world where this doesn't exist. There's no homelessness in some societies. People are valued, and if someone does live, is homeless, they won't be like on the street under a bridge, like, being treated like human refuse. They will probably be living out in the open somewhere as a hermit, as a recluse or something like that, and their home will be wherever they lay their head. They're like a wandering so-called vagabond, but they don't have that utter lack of social currency that the homeless people generally have in our society, And I think, how do we as society look at the poverty, for example, that exists and say, oh, it's the poor people's fault that they're poor? I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced some of the things that people from lower income realities have to deal with. It's actually, someone said it's very expensive to be poor because, for example, we have this saying in our society called time is money. The amount of time it takes to accomplish a task if you don't have money is immense. It's immense. Okay, let's say you have to go to a government clinic because you can't afford private healthcare. You will sit in a queue for hours. And then after that queue, another queue for another couple of hours, and then another queue for an hour or so. You know what I mean? It can take you 2 days to complete one task at a government clinic or hospital that you could, if you could afford private healthcare, pick up the phone and be like, you make your appointment, you get there in an hour, you're done. You know what I'm saying? Similarly with public transport, like with the taxi, well, taxis in South Africa are not public transport. Actually, it's privately owned in companies, but they serve the public more readily than the public transport. If you want to go from, like, let's say, Springs to Joburg and then to Sandton, it'll take you 4 hours to do that trip. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we look at these things and we just say, well, it's the fault of those low income people. We don't interrogate the factors. We don't interrogate the socioeconomic and political realities that exacerbate poverty, the mismanagement of public funds, the poor education system, because the education system has been hijacked since 94 in order to be a vehicle of the national democratic revolution, which is to bring about socialism in South Africa. Now, whether or not you want to use it to bring socialism or capitalism or whatever, still give people an education which allow them at least to become self-employed, so they're not reliant on the state. And yet the education system in this country really does put people in a situation where they end up in at least like 25% of the cases, if not more, 40, 50% of the cases, utterly reliant on the state. You know what I'm saying? And then when they don't have that dignity, when they don't have that upward social and economic mobility, we blame them, So it's like, where is the love? Where is the compassion for our fellow human beings? To say to them, look, you are worthy of much more than this, and we're going to make sure that you increase your capacity to generate the opportunities and seize the opportunities that allow you to reach your goals, because resource allocation and distribution should be happening through the economy, not through the government. But the economy in this world is there to serve essentially a parasitic elite, which is essentially like your body's resources going to serve a cancer tumor in your body. But if you give yourself the proper care, you will rid yourself of the cancer, and so that your body can function as it should. So I think as human beings, we really need to start ridding ourselves of the cancer of a lack of accountability, because if each of us can start to take accountability for our role in perpetrating and exacerbating the current malaise, a lot can happen. We like to blame the government, and the government, yes, must shoulder a lot of the blame. But we as citizens also vote for these people. And so I think it's really important to reflect on these things.